Hello everyone, today we're talking about brachial plexus. This is the most torturous topic for all healthcare students, whether you're in PT school, OT school, PA school, it doesn't matter. It's one of those topics that's like the bane of your existence when you're trying to learn it, right? You lose sleep over it. I know because I was there. I remember thinking, how on earth am I going to master this? Well, I have found a solution for you. I'm going to teach you how to draw out the brachial plexus in just under a minute, and it's going to look something like this in this video. Now, if you have the scaffolding down of the brachial plexus, then you can go ahead and put all your labels in, but mastering this sort of scaffolding of the brachial plexus is so important because you have a test, you have a lab assignment, you can pop this on a piece of paper and there you have all the information at your fingertips to make the right decisions and get the right answers that you're seeking. That's what we're going to do today. Now, in order to do that, the best thing you can do is be an active participant. Grab a whiteboard, grab some dry erase markers, and don't forget a timer. You definitely need a timer because when you do timed practice, that's how you become fluent at something, right? And when you're fluent, then you've truly mastered that information, not just for a test, but for long term. That's the goal here. It's almost like spaced repetition, but it's timed spaced repetition. That's what we're doing today with the brachial plexus. So grab your supplies and let's get cracking. Oh, before we do that, I forgot to tell you, there's one more thing that I'm going to offer in this video. At the very end, I'm going to offer you a kinesthetic way of learning the brachial plexus. So say you're like, I really do better with hands-on learning. I don't really want to draw. Well, I've got another option for you. That's going to be at the very end of the video. So do stay tuned and let's get cracking. Right, so you might be thinking, what's the big deal about a brachial plexus? Is it really that important? Well, it actually is. The brachial plexus are the power lines of your arm, essentially. It's a network of nerves that starts in your neck and it runs down to your sort of armpit area or axilla. And it supplies your arm, your shoulder, your muscles, hand, all that with sensation and movement. That's what it's responsible for. And so any injury in the area is going to really impact your functionality. So it's super important that you understand what nerves are impacted and what they do. Now, it forms from the spinal nerve roots of C5 to T1. Now, there are some occasional contributions from C4 to T2, but for the purposes of really just, understanding the basics of brachial plexus, just remember it's C5 to T1. Now, there is an analogy I think about with the brachial plexus, and sort of helps me remember. It's like a highway system. That's what I think about it. It starts with these sort of major roads, which would be your roots, and then it merges into highways, which would be like your trunk, right? And then on the highway, you know how you have an exit? So it splits off into different routes or divisions. And then it reorganizes into main roads, which would be your chords. And finally, after the main roads, there are these individual side streets or alleyways. And that would be your branches, right? These are the nerves that are going to the muscles and the skin. So that's essentially an overview of what the brachial plexus are and why they're important. Right, before we dive into drawing the brachial plexus, we have to have some sort of orientation, some sort of starting point, right? And that's what this mind map is going to do for us. So let me orient you to a few things. The first thing you need to know is these spinal roots. Just have to memorize this. C5 to T1, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then T1. Those are the spinal roots that are involved in the brachial plexus. Now, the next part is 2 mnemonics. The top mnemonic, which is remember to drink cold beer. This is very easy to remember because who wants to drink warm beer? That's just nasty, right? So this refers to all the components, the columns of the brachial plexus. We've got roots, trunk, divisions, chords, and branches, right? The next mnemonic is going to be where things end up, where the brachial plexus end and infiltrate. What nerves are those? Those are your branches. And the mnemonic here is MARMU, M-A-R-M-U. You can't see it all the way on this slide, but I do have other slides where you'll be able to see that very clearly. Essentially, it stands for musculocutaneous, axillary, radial, median, and ulnar nerves. Okay, now we've got one side, the top, and the other side. Now we just sort of have to fill in the middle. Okay, now before we pop into the middle, I do want to bring your awareness to this dorsal scapular nerve that comes right off the C5, and that infiltrates the rhomboid muscles, major and minor, and helps with retraction of the scapula. And then there's also a branch that goes into the levator scapulae, which, like the name says, elevates the scapula. Then if you want to scatter down here at the T1 area, you'll see the long thoracic nerve, and this innervates the serratus anterior muscle. You know, that muscle on the sides that looks like a serrated edge of a knife? That's what that infiltrates. So that's fairly easy to remember on this end of things, right? All right, now these are the roots, C5 to T1. Now we need to look at the trunks. And in the trunks, we know that there's some sort of alliances happening, kind of like Survivor. There's an alliance going on. C5 and C6 come together and form a trunk together. C8 says, hey, will you partner with me, T1? And they partner together and make the lower trunk. Now, the middle trunk, because there's an odd number, is sort of left alone and solo and decides, okay, fine, everyone's paired up, I'm just going to be on my own, and that's what the middle trunk does, right? Now, let me orient you to the key factors in the trunk. What you really need to remember in the trunks basically are the two types of nerves that are innervated here. You've got the suprascapular, very important that you understand the prefix here, suprascapular nerve. This infiltrates the supraspinatus and infraspinatus of the shoulder joint. Basically, we've got some abduction type action going on there. And then we've got the nerve to the subclavius. And if you remember, subclavius helps elevate your clavicle. Sorry, I said that wrong. But basically, those are the two nerves you need to remember. All right, now let's pop on to the divisions. This is where things get a bit tricky, right? Because now we've got, you know, like in a highway where some lanes are above and some are sort of going under. This is where we've got posterior and anterior divisions. And here it might look awfully confusing to you, but after you draw it, you will have a clear understanding of what is what. So I always suggest drawing it before you tackle the anterior and posterior divisions, because it just helps and makes a lot more sense. Now, the one thing I do want to highlight is the anterior divisions tend to be your flexors, and your posterior divisions are going to be your extensors. That's just something to remember that might help you also. So the anterior cord has the lateral pectoral nerve, which makes sense. You know what that innervates, obviously, the pectoralis, gosh, I can't talk, muscles. Then we've got the posterior cord, and that's going to hit your upper subscapular. Now remember, subscapular, very different than what the trunk does, right? And we've got the thoracodorsal nerve, the lower subscapular nerve, and then when we go down to the medial cord, there we've got, these are fairly easy to remember because they have the word medial in them. Medial pectoral nerve, medial brachial, and then medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve, right? And then we've got our branches, and you've got a mnemonic for that. So this essentially is an overview of what an in-depth look into the brachial plexus. Now we're going to simplify this so that it's easier to learn, but you do need to understand the sort of infrastructure in a more complex format also. All right, let's move on. So now we're actually ready to draw. So grab your supplies, get that dry erase board, dry erase markers, an eraser, and a timer, because what we're going to be doing is timed repetition in a little bit of spaced repetition, but it's really timed repetition, because if you don't time it, then you won't build that fluency. And fluency is what we need. When you're fluent at drawing the brachial plexus, then you have truly mastered it, right? And you'll remember it for long term. So let's do that. Grab your supplies and let's get started. So step 1 is basically about mastering the very first component, which is the spinal roots and then the parts at the top, right? So for that, you're going to use a mnemonic. Remember to drink cold beer, and then you're going to write down all the spinal roots that are involved. And you're going to repeat this, do it over and over again, as many times accurately in 1 minute. If you make an error, you've got to start all over again because you want to be fluent in the accurate format, not the inaccurate. And essentially what this is doing is building your fluency in the first part of drawing the brachial plexus, and it is a very efficient way of doing that. So you can see I can do, I don't know, I didn't count it, but I want to say maybe 6-7 times or so. And don't worry about being sloppy. At this point, you're just trying to get the actual content down and master it and be very fluent. So if somebody asks you, what spinal cord sections are involved, you will say C5, 6, 7, 8, and T1. And then they say, okay, what are the other parts? And you can say roots, trunks, divisions, chords, and branches. And there you have it. Okay, so that is step 1. You're going to repeat that until you get it right and you feel really comfortable. Let's go to step 2. Right, step 2, we are adding 2 other components. We're adding the trunks and we're adding the divisions. Now, you're still going to use a minute on your timer. You're still going to write out the spinal cord areas, and you're still going to write out the components at the top: roots, trunks, divisions, chords, and branches. But now you're going to draw out the trunks. And we know that C5 and C6 come together. We also know T1 and C8 come together, and C7 is a loner, right? The other thing we know is in the divisions, we have a strike at the top and a slash at the bottom. Now, this is helpful. If you're a bowler, this obviously is very easy for you to remember. I'm not into bowling, but this absolutely makes sense to me. So that's what you want to do, is memorize those little components and then just do it over and over again, as many times as possible in a minute. And I think, I didn't count, but I would say you can do it about 4 to 5 times in a minute, and that's pretty fast. So that's how you become fluent in the first 2 steps. Let's move on to the next. Okay, now we still have 1 minute on the timer, but we're adding another step. We're adding the chords. And the thing about the chords, what I want you to remember is you're going to draw 1 big wave and then 2 small opposing waves. That's how I remember it, right? So you're still going to start at the beginning. You're still doing your spinal cord roots. You're still writing out the parts on the top: roots, trunks, divisions, chords, and branches. And then you're drawing out your roots to trunk and your divisions, and then you're going to add a long big wave, and just pay attention to where it sort of starts and ends. And then you're going to draw 2 short waves in the opposite direction. And the thing you want to remember is the short wave from C8T1 trunk that actually joins and combines with the big wave chord. So that's just something to be mindful of, and make sure you're drawing accurately. Because if you're messing up, you need to start all again. You don't want to copy and practice inaccurate information, right? Okay, so now that is step 3. We're almost there. Let's move on. Okay, step 4, we are now adding the nerves that are actually coming off the spinal roots. So I call this the ladder from C5 to T1. So this, again, you're starting at the very beginning, putting your roots, trunks, divisions, chords, and branches, and then your C5 all the way to T1, C5 and 6 combine, T1 and C8 combine, strike and slash, big wave, small wave in the opposite direction. And here we're adding a ladder, and it's got 2 connections that you need to be mindful of. Obviously it starts at the C5, but we've also got a connection at C6 and C7. It sort of grabs a few branches from there too. So make sure you include that when you're making your ladder. Here's your strike / big wave, small wave that joins, ladder, connect, and connect. And there you have it. That is step 4. And again, you're going to do this as many times as possible in 1 minute. Again, it's not very pretty. Don't worry about it. Just make sure you get the accuracy down. Right, step 5, now you're adding the nerves, right? You're going to start off with the trunk and where the nerves are on the trunk. So again, you're starting from the very beginning, spinal roots, C5 to T1. Then you're drawing the trunks, strike and slash, big wave, small waves, the opposite direction, ladder, connection, connection. And then 3 nerves. First one's up, second one's down, third one's up. And as I'm drawing it, I like to use those verbal cues for myself to help me remember, because then you're really garnering a multi-sensory approach. Again, you're doing this as many times as possible in 1 minute. Big wave, small wave, ladder, connection, connection, and then mark your nerves on the trunk, 1 up, 2nd down, 3rd up. Here we go again, and as you can see, you're getting very fluent. I think that was, 3 or 4 times in a minute, so as many times as possible. All right, let's move on to the next. Step 6 is all about adding the nerves of the chords now that you see in the red on the visual. And again, you're starting at the top, and by this time you're very proficient in remembering to drink cold beer, I hope. And your spinal roots, you know that C7 is the loner. Divisions, we've got strike / chords. We've got 1 big wave, 2 small waves in the other direction. A ladder, which has 1 connection and it has another connection. Up, down, up, and then 1, 2, and 3 is what you want to remember as far as the nerves that go off the cord, and you've got about 20 seconds to spare, so that's pretty good, right? That is your basic brachial plexus. Okay, up until step 6 you can use a whiteboard, but now what I suggest is drawing up until step 6 on a piece of paper, popping it into a sheet protector, and then highlighting, because you want to highlight over and over again as many times in a minute, so you can get really fluent understanding the anterior and posterior regions. As you can see in my video here, I'm highlighting green for posterior and red is anterior. And just the sheer process of doing that as many times as possible in a minute is going to enable you to really master and understand which parts are posterior and which parts are anterior. And remember, anteriors are your flexors, posteriors are your extensors. That's just another clue to remember. Again, do it as much as possible and as often as possible in a minute. And then once you've figured out the highlighting, then what you can do is start from a scratch piece of paper and do all the steps again up until this highlighting part. And you should be able to do it in under a minute. Now what we want to do is get fluent at labeling our diagram of the brachial plexus, right? It's all very lovely, but if you don't know what the parts are, it's not very useful. So this is where you're going to use the same methodology to really get fluent and master labeling the brachial plexus. 1 minute on the timer, pop your brachial plexus diagram into a sheet protector and start labeling. Get as many labels down as you can in a minute. If you don't have it all done, repeat until you have it all down in under a minute. Again, you might have to use some shorthand because some of the nerves are really long names, right? And don't worry about making it pretty. It's okay. We just want to be accurate and we want to get it done in under a minute. That's the goal. So repeat, repeat, repeat until you've got it down. Don't forget we have the mnemonic that we use, which is MARMU, to remember the last part of the brachial plexus, which is the nerves or the branches. MARMU, M-A-R-M-U. Right, now that you're simply brilliant at drawing out the brachial plexus in under a minute and you know how to label it and highlight the anterior and posterior, what you want to do is use this mnemonic to figure out which spinal nerves correlate to the specific branches of the MARMU mnemonic, right? The musculocutaneous, axillary, median, radial, and ulnar. And this is how you do it. You take your hand and basically you're labeling it C5, C6, 7, C8, and T1, right? And then you're using this mnemonic. 3 musketeers assassinated, 5 mice, 5 rats, and 2 unicorns. So this is how it goes. 3 musketeers is for your musculocutaneous nerve, and that's going to be your C5, C6, C7. Assassinated, that's your axillary nerve, and that innervates C5 and C6. Then we've got the median nerve, which is out like this, 5 mice, right? And this is C5 all the way to T1. And then you've got 5 rats, which is also C5 all the way to T1. And then you've got 2 unicorns. This is your ulnar nerve, and it is C8 and T1. There you have it. So just remember that mnemonic to help you get that sorted. Okay, so the end product's going to look something like this, right? You've got your brachial plexus drawn, you've highlighted, you've labeled everything, and then you can add all the spinal roots that are involved with each nerve, right? And that, again, you can practice and get fluent by timing yourself and doing it within a minute. So you put 1 minute on the timer, just like we did before. You start adding all the spinal roots and try to get all of them within a minute. And you just keep doing it until you master that goal. All right, that's essentially how you draw the brachial plexus. Now remember, this mind map is available on my website, and if you are interested in a template where this sort of shell is available but you have to fill it in, let me know or comment and I will create one for you. But a way to use this mind map is just cover the answer with a post-it note and then write it on top. That's another way to use this mind map. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is show you our bonus tip. It's a kinesthetic learning activity that basically models out the brachial plexus using something called Wixxi-Stixx. These are these sticky bendable sticks that actually stick to the surface, or you can use spaghetti, you can also use pipe cleaners, but this is the most effective thing that I found, and it's just a fun video to watch. So I hope you enjoy it, and do comment to let me know if I can help in any other way.